spoiled speaking at this church because normally I'll come up and take as much time as I want, and then I just like sit down, and Samuel will always finish the rest of the message, or Shadi Uncle will finish the rest of the message. But a little bit about me, I'm a high school English teacher, so I'm very familiar with teaching to a bell. So I know how to keep a message concise, so I will not hold you over. But I do have a question for all of you to start out. And this is kind of like something that you have to participate in. And the question is, who here can pleat a sari? So if you can pleat a sari, oh, I hear a lot of, anyone here? Not a single female in that region. Okay, should wait, some of the aunties, I see you in sari, so I know you can wear a sari. Okay. Their husbands, okay, so I should see some husbands raising their hands. So in 2018, I could not pleat a sari, and part of the reason why is my mom is really, really good at pleating saris. So what's the point of learning? Because my mom will pleat it a lot better than I can. But I was a bridesmaid in my friend's wedding, and someone else pleated my sari for the first time. And a little bit of context, up until this point, whenever my mom put a sari on me, she would say, oh, it's just so short, like, oh, you can't wear any heels, it's too short. And in my head, I'm thinking, like, I'm 5'7", 5'8", I am not 6 foot. This sari should be able to fit me. So my mom obviously just like didn't want to show my belly or something, like that has to be the reason why. But my friend actually was a person who was pleating the sari, and she's like, no, you're wearing a little bit of a heel, and unfortunately your ankle is going to show. And I'm in shock and disbelief because there was a problem here, and I just told you what it was. The sari was too short for me. So basically, she told me, no, there's no way I can make it any longer. It's going to go pretty much where this salwar ends is where the sari ended, which is not how you want your sari to look. And I remember my friend's mother-in-law saw me, and she's like, no, like, you cannot go out like that. And so all the aunties are like tugging, like, wherever they can. And in that moment, I decided, okay, I'm going to learn how to pleat my own sari. And I went home and I talked to my mom about this, and I'm so confused because up until this point, my saris are always fitting me. And I'm between 5'7" and 5'8", but I am taller than the average Indian and American woman. So any Indian woman here above the height of 5'8"? No, see, this was the sari. There's no one here, right? I think the average American height is 5'4", and I think for Indian women they said 5 foot. How many 5-foot women do we have here? Okay. Abigail's apparently the average. So what I learned when I went home and I was talking to my mom about this, like, how could this happen to me? I had really short heels, I promise. Is this sari was not made for someone like me. It was a fashion sari. So basically those saris are made to basically save fabric. And since the average woman is 5 foot, why would they make a sari for someone like me? And this leads to the sermon focus for today, which is what God has for you. And I would even change as I was sitting down, I was like thinking about it a little bit more. I would almost say this sermon focus is tailor-made. So what does God have for you that is tailor-made? And the first point I want to make is we are all made for varying purposes. So we're used to a one-size-fits-all world, right? Like, it sounds amazing when you can buy a dress and it fits every single person, but the truth is that's actually really, really problematic. We were all made differently and made for different purposes. And there actually was a Bible study that I had with Kate, Rachel, Lydia, Abigail, so I'm going to give them a shout out. And we were reading Ephesians 4, and when we were going through this passage, this really stood out to me, this idea of oneness. So there's one body, one spirit, one hope, one Lord, one baptism, and one God and Father. So when you're looking at this, you might think, okay, being a Christian means that we're just one. We're one together. We have this community together. But when we look at the next verse, this verse stumped us for some time. It says in verse 7, "But grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift. So when God is giving grace to us, he is looking at every single individual in this room and giving according to our own individual stories. And we thought, does this feel fair when we know that God gives one gift to one person and maybe a different gift to us? We can become envious of what other people have. And I think we've all kind of like experienced this. Anyone here have siblings? You have siblings? So if you have siblings, you know that there's always one PlayStation for both of you. There is one package of Oreos for all of you, right? There's one Buzz Lightyear toy, but do you end up sharing it the same amount? I guarantee you probably don't, right? You're like, no way. And this seems kind of unfair, right? Like there's this oneness, but there also is a differentiation between how we receive these different gifts. And growing up, my older brother is very smart, and what are you laughing at, Abigail? Okay. And he is not me, right? And I think growing up, I could feel kind of envious of that. Like my brother is really, really smart, and I'm also smart. But, okay, you guys didn't have to laugh that much. But God gave differently to us, right? So we don't need two Christopher Thomases in this world. We need a Christopher Thomas and we need a Nita Thomas. And this goes back to 1 Corinthians 12:5, and it says, and there are varieties of service, but the same Lord. Amen. So we may have these different gifts, we may be called in different ways, but we all come together with this one purpose, all serving the same Lord. And we're all made different with different purposes for this one common goal. And this makes me think of like a puzzle, right? So we may really want to be the centerpiece of a puzzle, but a puzzle is not complete unless we have all these varying different types of pieces inside of it. And I'm going to skip a little bit forward here. I'm going to skip to where it says, what makes it so hard to be who God created us to be? And part of the reason why it's so hard to be who God has created us to be is by making that choice, we may disappoint others around us. And this is actually taken from the book, Emotionally Healthy Relationships, Day by Day. And in this book, we look at Luke 2:49. This passage, I believe, was pointed out. I couldn't find the exact place where this book had mentioned it, but I, from my memory, remembered reading about this. But in this passage, essentially, Jesus' parents are looking for him, and they can't find him. And he says, I was in my Father's house. I was, of course, where I am meant to be. So when we look at Jesus, we see that in the very nature of who he was, he disappointed others because others wanted him to be a certain person, but he knew his calling was greater than just being whatever the person next to him wanted him to be. In Galatians 1:10, we see, are we seeking the approval of men, or are we seeking the approval of God? And we even see a contrast when we look at Jacob and Esau, because there was no way for them to please both parents, essentially. So in my analysis, it says Isaac loved Esau because he ate all of his game, and Rebecca loved Jacob. So the same reasons why one person may hate you may be the same reason why someone else loves you. So why are we trying so hard to make everyone else around us love us? And the final point I want to make is sometimes we receive things that we do not want, and this is part of the purpose that God has for our lives. And the perfect example of this is in Luke 22. Jesus is asking, Father, God, if you are willing, remove this cup for me. I don't think any of us would want to experience what Jesus experienced in this moment. And Jesus did not want to experience it. He was asking for it to be removed. But that was what God had for him. And we look, and the response given to him was not taking away the thing that was made for him that he needed to do, but it was God strengthening him in that moment. And we look at Esther. She feels safe in the palace. She doesn't want to leave. She doesn't want to risk anything, and she feels like she doesn't have to. And it is Mordecai who is saying that She was called in this place for this reason, and if she misses his purpose, someone else may do it. And I'm wondering in our lives, is there something that we don't really want that God made for you, that he's asking you to do, that we just want to walk away from? And the final point is, do not miss your purpose. So we see in Esther 4:13-14, it says, Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, Do not think of yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And you know whether you will not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. So Esther has a role in here. She has a pivotal role that I think a lot of us look at, and it's clearly noticeable. But someone else has a role. Mordecai has a role. He is someone who is speaking to Esther, calling her out, showing her what she needs to do. The king has a role in here as well. What would happen if Mordecai did not think his role was important? He may not have been the person talking to the king, but he was the person who inevitably influenced the king's actions for the whole kingdom. So maybe God is putting you in a certain place and it doesn't feel important, but trust that if God has you somewhere, that he has a reason for it. God has made you as you are for a reason, every single part of you. And he has unique gifts and callings that are specifically for you. Do not miss out on what God has for you or what he has called you to do. If you do, you do not only hurt yourself, but all those around you who need you to use your gift. Yes. May God bless you with these words.